Hi, everyone. Mike Allegre, fullaccesssports.com, and our special student-athlete interview this week on the men's side of the house is for men's basketball. And he's a new face to the team, not to the campus. Spent a year on campus as a student prior to this, but in his senior year, he has become quite a force and a starter for the men's basketball team. And I'm taking to this gentleman right here, Elliot Babcock-Krenk. We call him EBK because it's quicker. I think you probably prefer that as well. I don't know. But Elliot's kind of a softer-spoken guy, but just talking with him before we got started here, a great background that went from high school at Lake Oswego to Humboldt State University in Northern California, and then up to here last year academically. And this year it was decided you'd play. You could have played last year here at Willamette, or how did that work?
Yeah, I believe I could have played, but I spoke with the coaches, and after speaking with them, they more or less told me that they wanted me to play this year. Just because it was a new group of guys, and I think he had 3 or 4 seniors last year that he really wanted to give all the playing time to, give them their respect more or less. So for me, I was going to be here anyway, so it didn't really make a difference.
Let's start where you came from, and that is Lake Oswego High School, and probably one of the more famous recent graduates of Lake Oswego, plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that's Kevin Love. And big number 42 was a guy who was a year ahead of you in high school. You played with him from junior high and high school, played with him on a title team?
Yep, I did.
And talk a little bit about that. You know, it was like his senior year, Kevin was the team because he was so big and strong and really dominating. So everyone, how did that work as far as getting Kevin the ball, or was it just find Kevin open, or what?
I mean, he was definitely the guy, and I think everything we did was more or less catered to him. But I think his senior year, he averaged 36 and 17 or something along those lines. Wow. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing we took away from it was to play to our strength, and he was obviously our strength. So.
And when you play alongside of a guy like that, it's just like anywhere where you've got someone good, it tends to make you better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he definitely made us all better. He got us looks just as much as we got him looks. At the end of the day, he was obviously getting more, but I think just being around someone like that who has that kind of skill, that kind of ability, definitely starts to wear off on you.
And then you stick around another year. He goes to UCLA. He's into the NBA after 1 year. You're at Humboldt State for a couple. And then they change coaches, and it's time for you to make a decision. Stay or come to Willamette. Why come to Willamette?
I think the biggest aspect of coming here for me was school, actually, to be perfectly honest. Humboldt was more or less not all that academically stimulating for me. So the biggest appeal was having a real education.
And that's one thing, we have to work at it. One of the things at this level, obviously, the student becomes before the athlete, and you've seen that already in motion for you. It's homework and then hit the hardwood.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit different from what I'm used to. The catering to the athletes is not necessarily the same as where I previously came from, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I grew up in a community where there was a lot of stress on education, so definitely something I'm used to.
Well, when you look at the team, how we are, you mentioned something before we started broadcasting, and that was the expectation from everyone else was different than the expectation of your team as far as the other coaches are concerned versus how Kip and the Bearcats look at themselves. What was that?
Well, we were picked preseason, I think, to finish number 9 in the league, which would be dead last. And I mean, from my perspective, I don't think that's necessarily means anything. I think at the end, when we really come down to it, it's a lot more of an attitude than necessarily what people think or what is the expectation, so to speak.
And when you talk about an attitude, Kip has generated the fact that they may think we're last place, we think 9th place, but we are not. We know who we are, we know our identity, and with the talent that we have and all the tools we have, we're better than that. At least that's the impression I got.
Yeah, that's how I feel too, and I think just in the locker room, it's interesting to see kind of. I think when we won our first 1 or 2 games, I'd never seen a locker room that excited about winning 1 or 2 games. And that's something that it's always been an expectation for me to win a game. Like, winning a game was never a super big deal, and I think that's a transition that I've really seen in our locker room. Like, when we came in the locker room against LC, I think we were tied at halftime or super close. And we actually ended up losing that game by 10, but the attitude in the locker room was never that we were going to lose or there were no heads down. There's no one doubting the fact that we were going to win the game. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest transitions I've seen so far in our season.
The expectation to win.
It's just the attitude and the understanding that we can win games, and it's more of an expectation than something that's up there to grab, so to speak. We should win a game.
Talking with Elliot Babcock-Krenk of the Bearcats, and as we look at what's ahead, certainly in the weekend, you have heard all of the rumors from coaches and teams and whatnot, the Eastern Washington swing, how tough it is. Certainly, you look at the Eastern Washington swing, it is a challenge, especially with Whitworth being ranked in the top 5 and Whitman being in the top 25. What are your takes on what you've seen about the teams, especially with both of them on the road?
Well, watching them, actually, the first couple weeks we played in a tournament down in California where we actually got to see them, and I think they're definitely beatable. And one of the things I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking is the expectations, the stigma, the stereotypes of a team that's consistently top 10 in the country and whatnot is not something I've heard at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, I might have heard Whitman or Whitworth's name whispered a couple of times growing up, but I haven't heard it daily. I haven't seen it. So for me, I mean, I'm going into it with a clean slate, and I think that's how our team is going to approach this game now. And
last point, very briefly, you're here, obviously, the student athlete. You've already looked at business and a few other opportunities. What were you trying to do when you get that degree this year? Where will you be going? What do you want to do?
The plan is to go to business school, so, and assuming I get in and whatnot, that hasn't really come to fruition yet, but I'm in the process of filing applications and whatnot. So,
well, Elliot Babcock-Krenk, we're glad you're chatting with us. Thank you. Good luck the rest of the way. Thanks for being on the team. Certainly, you're making a big difference, and he has. And with Elliot, I'm Mike Allegre. Thank you for joining us, everybody, here on FullAccessSports.com.